tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So, like in the UK now, it's nice to be able to see people being able to come to the monastery now and practice with us. And I was actually here for Wesak 2 years ago, and the hall was empty, of course, with the COVID. So nice. It's full house tonight, isn't it? Very nice. Yeah. And especially that we can, gather together on this full moon of May to recollect the Buddha. So it's a very important occasion in the Buddhist calendar, and yes, and it's good people are able to come to join us for this evening, and of course some still joining us online. So we call it a hybrid. So some join online, some here in the flesh. Yeah, so it's an evening where we can recollect some things about the Buddha and his life. And there is one of the themes of mindfulness sati is like Buddha Nusati, where we recollect the Buddha and things about the Buddha's life or qualities of the Buddha. And the idea is more we can reflect on these qualities, it helps to remind us maybe to try and bring some of these qualities into our own lives. So the more we reflect on these skillful qualities, more the chance they may arise for us in the different situations in life that we find ourselves in. And what I thought to reflect on tonight is one of our parittas that we chant. Some of you may be familiar with the parittas, and one tonight is called the Jayamangala Paritta that I'd like to reflect on. And this is about the qualities that the Buddha brought forth when he was, challenged, because the Buddha had to face many challenges during his life, and this paritta is about some of those challenges and how the Buddha responded to them and the sort of quality of mind that he responded with. And the first of these great victories of the Buddha is on the occasion of his night of enlightenment, when the Buddha he determined to sit under the Bodhi tree until he'd realized complete enlightenment. And so that was a cue for Mara to summon all his forces to try and shake the Buddha off his seat. So the story goes that Mara came forth on an elephant called Gulamala, and with 1,000 arms and a weapon in each of these arms, a very fearsome image. Yeah. And according to the way the Buddha subdued Mara, he touched the earth, and then he brought to mind his spiritual perfections. So these like the parami, the 10 parami. Even though in this guitar it mentions dana, but that's the actual first of the 10 parami. To bringing forth the qualities, the paramis he cultivated. Because of this, Mara couldn't shake the Buddha. And if you're not familiar with these 10 paramis, and there's many Jataka stories about past lives of the Buddha when he cultivated these, so they are, first one is dana, generosity, sila, virtue, nikama, renunciation, satya, truthfulness, adhitthana, determination, virya, energy, metta, loving kindness, and upekkha, equanimity. I don't know if I missed any, but these are the 10 parameters. So because the Buddha had cultivated these to a high level, Mara couldn't shake the Buddha from his quest. So he continued and realized enlightenment. And, the story goes, Mara manifested many things, fearful images, sensual images, anything to try and distract the Buddha from his goal. So this is one of the great victories. And the way I sort of use this story in practice, like I try to bring this image into meditation. And one way you can, the practice of meditation is about cultivating this inner Buddha, this quality of being awake, wise, and aware. And, during cultivating this inner Buddha, we have all sorts of mind states and thoughts manifesting, don't we? Fearful, fear, sensual thoughts, fearful thoughts, anxieties, all these different mind states that can arise. And, I relate it to like the Buddha having to face all these different Maras, Maras hordes is the way we, in our practice we have to face certain, habits or defilements that in the mind. But just like the Buddha was able to abandon them, and the Buddha said, we too can abandon them. The Buddha, again, like Ajahn Kalyana was mentioned, was a human being like us who cultivated and was able to abandon these defilements. So in the same way, by cultivating, these paramis ourselves, cultivating skillfulness of mind, this can give us the strength, the goodness to deal with the challenges, the challenging mind states. So by cultivating these paramis, then the more we cultivate these, the less defilements will overpower the mind, you can say. And I'm reminded of this, when I travel in Australia. In England we don't sort of have it so much because it's a very wet climate in England. But you see these little signs saying the risk of forest fires, don't you, around this part of the world. But if it's been raining, then there's low, it's on the green, isn't it? There's less chance of a forest fire happening. And I see this as like the cultivation of paramis. It's something like, they say, sort of moistens the heart so that the fires don't overwhelm it. The goodness that we cultivate, the paramis we cultivate. So that, things might arise in the mind, but the more we, cultivate this goodness, they don't stick, they don't overpower. Yeah, they don't. We just have a small fire rather than a forest fire. Yeah. So that's the encouragement of the Buddha to cultivate these paramis, and using the situations in life too, cultivate these. So we can reflect on these and maybe keep one in mind in our day sometimes, and notice when we can actually bring it forth to maybe help with a situation. But Maori didn't stop there. Even after Buddha's enlightenment, Maori didn't give up. So he'd come again to the Buddha after his enlightenment. He'd say things like, "Oh, you sit there. What are you doing? You should be back helping your wife and child. And the king's getting old. You should be ruling the kingdom now." And all these sort of things that Maori would say to the Buddha. And the Buddha responded to Mara by saying, "I know you, Mara." And then Mara would say, "Oh, the Buddha knows me." And then he would disappear. And, this is, the skill of developing like mindfulness and wisdom. The more we're mindful and wise, then, say again, when we know a defilement in the mind, when we really know it clearly, it can't overpower the mind. It can't take over the mind. And when you don't give power to these defilements, they just naturally pass away because there's nothing to keep them going. I quite like the one of the analogies of Ajahn. The analogy is like there's a room and there's one seat in this room. Right? Now, if you're sat in that seat, then whoever comes in the room won't stay very long because you're sat in the only seat. So in the same way, the Buddha said, if we stay with this quality of awareness, if we're aware of these things that arise in the mind, but don't go out to get involved with them, don't leave our seat, the seat of awareness and knowing. If we don't leave that place in our hearts and go out to get preoccupied with these things, then these things can't take hold of the mind. They can't. But of course, if we get out the chair, then it can sit in the chair. Yeah. So this is why, in practice, we cultivate mindfulness and wisdom, so we become more aware of, unskillful mind states, thoughts, but we don't. They don't take over the mind. We develop the skill to know them and to let them go. The second verse of this Paritta refers to an incident with a yaka. Now, a yaka is like what we would say in English is like an ogre, and they wield certain powers and influence, and they can be very aggressive, and sometimes quite a nasty bit of work, really. And this particular yaka called Alavaka was caused a lot of problems in a certain region, and breeding a lot of fear into the people in a certain area. So the Buddha, being aware of this, decided to go and sit in the yaka's cave. So when the yaka returned to his cave and saw the Buddha sat there, he was a bit upset and decided to first try to disturb the Buddha with his, so to say, psychic abilities. But he said that because of the Buddha's power of his metta, which is also a parami, power of the Buddha's metta, he couldn't shake the Buddha. So he thought he'd sort of try and sort of upset the Buddha's metta. So he says to the Buddha, get out of my cave. And the Buddha says, very well, and went out. Then the yaka said, come in, monk, come into the cave. And the Buddha said, very well, and came into the cave. Again, the yaka said, get out, monk. The Buddha said, very well, and went out. And then come in, monk. The Buddha said, very well, came in. And did this 3 times. And then the 4th time, when the Yaka said, "Get out, monk," Buddha said, "No, I'm not going out this time." But then it went into a sort of conversation on Dhamma. And through that conversation, he was able to establish the Yaka in wholesome things. But he said what the quality that the Buddha brought forth to tame the Yaka was patience. The quality of patience. He was patient and, humility to keep on going in and out of the cave when he was ordered to. So, and again, in the monastery you hear a lot about the importance of patience. Like tonight, we recited the Awada Patimokkha. And, if we really want to cultivate wholesome things, that patience is something that's very necessary, because things don't happen instantly when we, cultivate skillful qualities. We have to work at them and endure some challenges and difficulties. And also, patience is one of these paramis as well. And, in our everyday life, something to reflect on is how to, to use situations in life to cultivate patience. Because in this day and age where everything's so instant and technology, we expect things, to happen quite quickly. And when it doesn't happen according to our wishes, we can get very upset and angry. So this sort of quality of patience in modern day life, I feel, is sort of on the diminishing a bit. And just an example I've mentioned before, just arriving on Waterloo Station in London and finding that all the trains have been delayed because of signal problems. So an hour, you have to wait an extra hour for the trains. So what's the use of getting upset about it? Just stand on the platform and breathe, and wait for the train. That's what the Buddha would encourage us to do. Just patiently wait. So I'm stood on the platform, and this businessman, suit, briefcase, comes up to me. He's really angry, and he says to me, "You might be, peaceful with this, but I want to wring somebody's neck." He was really out to get somebody. We see, that's it, the expectation of things to be on time and always want things to go one's way. And when things don't go one's way, how people get so angry and upset. But this is life, isn't it? Life doesn't always unfold the way we like it to. So if we don't have any patience, we're going to suffer, unnecessarily, really. He didn't really have to suffer, did he? He could have just stood on the platform with me and breathed in and out. But he chose to get quite upset. And, many instances in life, I don't know what the traffic's like in Melbourne, but in England we have this famous road motorway called the M25, and its reputation is that it's the biggest car park in Europe sometimes, because nothing moves. So a sort of 1.5 hour journey can take 3 hours because you just get stuck in traffic. Yeah. So again, patience. Yeah. When we have to queue up for things, supermarkets, shopping, whatever, opportunities, aren't they, to really reflect on patience. Yeah. A couple of people have mentioned to me recently about builders and how builders sometimes get things done on time. This is a common thing, I sometimes think builders are here to help us repair and build our houses, and to help us to cultivate patience. Our last building at Chithurst was scheduled to be finished in December so we could have it done for the winter retreat. But it was February before it was finished. So it's a very important quality, and if it's cultivated and developed, it's of great benefit and help us to be more adaptable to the situation in life and less reactive to situations. So the Buddha became quite a well-known teacher, had a big following. And what can happen in these situations, somebody wants to take over from the Buddha, wants the power and the authority. And this was his own cousin, Devadatta. So he plotted to try and get rid of the Buddha, try and kill the Buddha. And he did a few attempts, actually. But one of his attempts was to send a sort of a bit of a mad elephant down the road where he knew the Buddha would be going on his alms round in the morning. So the Buddha was walking up the road, and then this crazy elephant was coming the other way. And initially, his attendant Ananda wanted to self-sacrifice, go in front of the Buddha to save the Buddha's life. But the Buddha said, "No, Ananda, it's okay. Stand behind me." And it says that the Buddha extended his thought of loving kindness to the elephant, and as he got nearer to the Buddha, it calmed down, so it didn't harm the Buddha. Now this incident, I always reminds me of when sometimes you meet dogs on a country lane, and when they first see you, they're sometimes a little bit afraid and they start barking at you. And if you tend to react to their barking, they carry on barking. But I've noticed if you just don't bother about it and just have a nice feeling towards the dog, they stop barking. So, people are, and animals, are sensitive towards an attitude of friendliness. So, metta is, the benefits of it, the Buddha mentions on numerous occasions, in terms of, protection. Yeah? You're dear to human beings and non-human beings. Good health from the cultivation of metta, good sleep. So many benefits the Buddha mentions. So in our life, opportunities where we can, do things to, generosity, helping others, a kind word, any little act of metta accumulates, and that becomes a source of goodness and strength for the heart. And of course, also the Buddha said it really supports the practice of meditation. They say one who has cultivated metta, the mind is easily concentrated, easily comes to samadhi. So the third victory was through the power of metta. And the next verse is about the Buddha's meeting of Gulamala. Now, Gulamala was a serial killer. He'd killed many people and was hanging their fingers around his neck. That's the meaning of Gulamala, finger necklace. And the Buddha decided to offer himself as the next victim. So he walked where Gulamala was, And the Gulamala saw the Buddha coming and said, "Oh, good, I'll get a monk today." get his finger, And so Gulamala started to follow, chase after the Buddha to get him. But as the story goes, the Buddha, through some sort of psychic ability, always was able to keep ahead of Angulimala. So Angulimala's running flat out. The Buddha's just walking, but Angulimala can't catch the Buddha. And eventually, Gulamala says, "Stop, monk." So the Buddha stops and turns around and says, "I've stopped. It's you who haven't stopped." Then Gulamala thought, these monks are not supposed to tell lies. I'd stopped, but you hadn't stopped. And then the Buddha explained, he said, "I've stopped harming living beings. But you haven't. You haven't stopped harming living beings." And when the Buddha said that, Angulimala's whole attitude changed. He softened and threw down his weapons. So even though in this particular event it says the Buddha conquered Angulimala by his psychic abilities, I think also, I like to think he also conquered Angulimala by his compassion. That statement, "I've stopped harming living beings." It's like a statement of coming from a deep quality of compassion, because the Buddha had compassion for Angulimala, even though he'd done all these, pretty awful things. And then, of course, he became a monk and redeemed himself. In England, they've called the prison network in England Gulamala. The idea that, people, through sometimes the force of circumstances, end up doing things that are unskillful. Like Gulamala didn't start out bad, but just circumstances led him to be a serial killer. So, this story is saying that, people have the potential to change. Even people who do very unskillful things, if approached in a skillful way, can change. So people who've been in prison for unskillful things can change their ways. So that's why they called it Gulamala. And, I've been in prisons, and actually I found the prisoners, that I meet quite nice people, quite, interested and keen. So if we can respond, you say, but this story respond to, sometimes aggression in a more skillful, compassionate way, maybe that can help to pacify the situation. Maybe sometimes in our life we have to deal with aggressive people, maybe not somebody trying to kill us, but somebody can be quite, aggressive and shouting, and how to maintain our composure in that when we have to meet aggression. I thought I'd share a story and from my school days. And in my last year at school, when I was 18 years old, I was elected as a prefect. And a prefect is helped, the job of a prefect is to help to keep some of the younger ones a bit more in line, So to organise the queues, the refectory, and in the classroom at break time you have to stay in the classroom to make sure the kids didn't wreck things. It was a bit of a rough school, And so there was these, in 2 years below me, there were these two boys who were renowned for being tough guys. And, they were like the bullies and the tough guys of that year. Nobody would mess with them. And on one occasion, I was organising a queue for this meal, and these guys just pushed in, But being a prefect, I thought, oh, back to the back. And they wouldn't. I had to really shout at them to get them to go to the back. So this happened. Anyway, sometime later, in those days, 18, my nightlife, going out to the pub and things in those days, before my Buddhist days. So I'm walking back from the pub about 11 o'clock at night. And I come to the top of the road where I live, and I bump into these two guys, And they confront me, and they put their fists up and said, "Do you want to fight?" Because I'd upset them, at school. Now, fortunately, they had blood on their hands because there was a bush shelter there, and they'd been pushing their fists through the windows of the bush shelter. This is what they were sort of guys who were like. So I saw the blood on their hands, and I said, "Oh, what have you done to your hands?" And started to sort of be friendly towards them. "Oh, you better get that seen to, And then the aggression just stopped. They calmed down, and their fists went down. And I actually ended up walking them home, because I had a similar with cuts, that after you lose so much blood, you get quite faint. So I walked them home to make sure they didn't faint. And I had no problem with them again after that. But just show even the sort of roughest and toughest sometimes respond just to a non-aggressive, friendly response to them, even their aggression. And I have met some quite aggressive people in my time as a monk too, but fortunately I've been able to keep calm with it. Sometimes a bit fearful sometimes, but calm with my fearfulness. Yeah. So the incident with Gulamala, yes, people can change. Don't give up on people who have lost the plot a bit, have lost their way a bit. And the importance of how we respond to people. So these are things that this story speaks to me about within Gulamala. Now, of course, when you become famous again, there's people who are jealous. And the Buddha was getting quite a big following and a lot of support. But there were other teachers who were losing their disciples to the Buddha. So they were getting quite jealous of the Buddha. So they thought, what can they do to defame the Buddha? So they got this woman to concoct some stories about the Buddha. So she would be walking towards where the Buddha lived in the evening, and people say, "Where are you going?" And she said, "I'm going to meet the great recluse," And she'd do this, for several nights, so people think she was going to see the Buddha. Yeah. And then, doing this for a while, then she padded her dress out, looked like she was pregnant. And then she stood up when the Buddha was teaching and said, "Hey monk, look what you've accused him of fathering her baby in this public occasion." And interesting, the Buddha's response, he didn't sort of get defensive, but he just said, "Well, Chincha was her name as well. Chincha, the truth of this, only you and I know. Only you and I know." He said that. And so he kept his sort of equanimity, didn't react, just said, "The truth of this, you and I know." Now, as the story goes, the Buddha he had friends in high places. So there was some divine intervention, and the wood fell out from under her dress, and the truth was exposed, that she wasn't really pregnant. But they say that the theme behind this is that the Buddha won this victory through just keeping calm, through, you say, peacefulness, to equanimity. So, in terms of how this story can, we can use this story in our own life is, in our life we're going to get praised and blamed, aren't we? As the Buddha said, there isn't now, there's never been, or there never will be, somebody who's wholly praised or wholly blamed. When we take on this birth of a human being, we're bound to get criticized at some point. It's part of the package. And even though we can tend to like to experience the praise, but sometimes we're going to get criticized, and sometimes not valid criticism. Sometimes it can be through people being quite jealous of something that we have, or from jealousy. People maybe don't like us for some reason. So, how to respond to criticism and comments is when these things do happen. And so this story is about, reflecting, as a human being, we're bound to get criticized, just like the Buddha was criticized and accused. So, when we remember the Buddha's response, maybe it can help us to respond in a more peaceful way. Yeah. And, in a peaceful way doesn't mean you don't respond to the criticism, but maybe you do it without shouting back or getting aggressive back. You can put your explanation to, in a more sort of peaceful way. So that equanimity is not one of these paramis, isn't it? How to be more, say, composed in the midst of blame. And maybe that's also related to, I think the more we tend to get carried away when we're praised, the more we'll suffer when we're blamed. So also equanimity is about not getting too carried away with the praise either, keeping that sort of mental balance in our lives. Because, the more we cling to praise, the more we suffer when we're blamed. That's the law of karma, in a way. Yeah. So, remember this story, when we get criticized in some way, how to respond more skillfully to criticism. Even if it's unfair criticism. Sometimes it can be a fair criticism also. We're not perfect, are we? Sometimes, in our life as monks, we're asked to be open to feedback and criticism. And, if we're not, we can't really train as monks if we're not willing to receive feedback. Now, another thing that would also the Buddha had to confront was people trying to knock him down, like politicians. They like to sort of prove each other, knock each other down. So you get these people who would, like debaters, who would come and try and make the Buddha look foolish with debate, like they do in Parliament. So this particular very skilled debater called Satchika came to the Buddha. He'd heard something from another monk about a certain teaching, and he thought, I can pull that apart. He thought, and it was really the teaching of no self. And he had this good argument that there is a self, and the Buddha responded to him. Firstly, he asked him a question. He said, the king of this district, has he got the power to put people to death if he wants? And Satchika said yes. Does he have the power to put people in prison? Yes. Does he have the power to fine people? And he said, yes. And he said, do you have power over your body? And the Satchika had to think about that. We could just ask him, can you stop your body from getting all sick and die? What is he saying? And so this threw Satchika off, and he couldn't win his debate anymore. So he went away a bit humbled by his interaction with the Buddha. So this victory, the Buddha won through his wisdom, through his panya. And in the sutras, it talks about like the 4 ways the Buddha would respond to questions. And one was, with a short answer. Another one was with like a more long answer. And the third one would be by asking a question back, which was happening in this case. And in some cases, the Buddha would just keep noble silence. So this is the 4 ways the Buddha responds to a question. And I quite like this. I think it's very skilled if you can put a question back to somebody by asking them a question. I think it's and there's quite a few occasions in the Buddha's life where he does respond to a question by asking a question back. Another such incident, so again, people trying to put down the Buddha. So somebody says to the Buddha, you're supposed to be known as the great compassionate one. Is the Buddha compassionate to all living beings? And the Buddha says, I have compassion for all living beings. So then the question is, if you had compassion to all living beings, then you'd spend the equal time with everybody. But as it is, you spend more time with the monks and nuns, you spend even less time with the Buddha, followers, your lay followers, and even less time with the people of other sects, of other traditions. So how can you say you're compassionate to all beings, if you give all your time to these, to different, you show different levels of in their mind, different levels of compassion to different people. And so the Buddha responded, he said, if you was a farmer and you had 3 fields, one was a very fertile field that would grow things really quick. Another one was a moderately fertile field. And the third one was really not a very good field. It was all full of salty soil and not very good soil. Where would you plant your seeds? So the man said, well, naturally in the fertile field. He says, well, that's why I teach more to the monks and nuns, because they're more fertile. There's more things they'll benefit, And so this is the way he would answer questions. And it is, something in life that maybe sometimes we do get accused of maybe not doing enough. And I think, for us as practitioners, we have to also look after ourselves. I mean, the Buddha was well developed, he just looked after others generally. But I think also we have a field here we have to look after also. So also to have compassion for ourselves and give our time, to come and practice, come to peaceful places and meditate and things like this. And sometimes we get, people say you're being very selfish, going to the monastery, just thinking of yourself and meditating for yourself. And you can read this sort of comments, But it's important, to look after ourselves, and that helps us also to look after others. Because, now you hear terms like compassion fatigue. People very busy doing things for others but not looking after themselves. And the long-term results maybe is not so good. People can end up being quite resentful and burnt out and getting quite negative and things. So the importance of, maintaining something skillfulness in our own heart and doing the things to help maintain that, then can be more effective with the things we do. So if we maintain a good state of mind, it's like then we can it's like having a clean cloth to clean things. Then it does a good job. But if the cloth is dirty, maybe we can make a bigger mess, can't we? Yeah. So the idea of through cultivating a good heart, skillfulness, then the things we do can be more effective. So the importance of looking after our hearts. So it's also wisdom, knowing how to keep this balance in our life and not getting caught into people who might try to trigger off like guilt feelings in us for doing this or doing that. Important to also to spend time to look after our own hearts. So that's a great skill. If somebody asks you a question, if you can put it back to them with a question, it's can have a very good. But I think it takes quite a level of wisdom to do that. And the last two incidents is more about taming a naga, an arrogant naga, which was more like Moggallana did for the Buddha, and also the last one's about a Brahma god who thought he was the tops, but he wasn't actually the top. So the Buddha, through his spiritual knowledge, was able to show the Brahma his limitations. Yeah. So the last part of this particular paritta asks us to reflect on these victories. You say actually every day. And again, what I was saying before, if we do remember these incidents and bring them to mind, if we're chanting this paritta, these different occasions and the qualities the Buddha brought forward, maybe it can help us to remind us in similar circumstances to bring these qualities forward ourselves, in terms of cultivating paramis, to deal with Mara, patience, kindness, peacefulness, wisdom, these sort of qualities that are mentioned in this particular guitar. So this is part of, to me, to come and reflect on the Buddha's life and how he dealt with things to me gives inspiration and sometimes they can come to mind in difficult situations and really help. So even in our meditation, we can Buddha Nusati. Sometimes if our mind tends to want to think a lot, then maybe we can think about some of these stories, and it can maybe have a calming effect on our hearts when we reflect on qualities of the Buddha and how he dealt with things. Buddha Nusati can be a way of bringing more calm and mindfulness. Give it a theme of meditation also. So on this night of Vaisakha celebration, I'd like to offer these thoughts for you to reflect on.